Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
What's going on, Mets fans? And I need to ask you something before we even get started with this video. Are you tired of watching David Stearns operate like he's running the Tampa Bay Rays instead of the New York Mets? Are you frustrated seeing the richest owner in baseball get treated like he's got a limited budget? Because that's exactly what we need to talk about today. David Stearns has a small market mindset in a big market environment, and it's absolutely destroying this franchise from the inside out. Smash that like button if you're ready for some truth, and stick around because I'm going to break down exactly why Steve Cohen's billions mean absolutely nothing if the person spending that money refuses to actually use it. Here's the fundamental problem that nobody wants to talk about. David Stearns built his entire reputation in Milwaukee. He was the general manager of the Brewers from 2015 to 2022. And during that time, he did a really good job. He built competitive teams. He made smart trades. He developed young talent. He squeezed every ounce of value out of a limited payroll. In Milwaukee, with those constraints, with that reality, Stearns was exceptional. He knew how to win without spending money. He knew how to find undervalued players. He knew how to be creative and scrappy and efficient. But here's what David Stearns doesn't seem to understand. He's not in Milwaukee anymore. He's in New York. And everything that made him successful in Milwaukee, all those skills and strategies and approaches, they don't just become irrelevant in New York. They become liabilities. Because the entire point of having Steve Cohen as your owner, the entire advantage that the Mets have over 90% of baseball, is that you don't have to operate with those constraints anymore. You can just go get the best players. You can outspend everyone. You can be aggressive and dominant and overwhelming. But Stearns can't do it. He can't flip that switch in his brain. He's so conditioned from his years in Milwaukee to always be looking for the cheaper option, the more efficient allocation, the smarter play that saves money, that he can't recognize when he's in a situation where he doesn't need to make those choices anymore. It's like giving someone who's been eating ramen noodles for 10 years unlimited access to a 5-star restaurant, and they still order the ramen because that's what they're comfortable with. Let me give you specific examples of how this small market mentality is killing the Mets. Pete Alonso walks to Baltimore. Why? Because Stearns thinks first basemen are overvalued in free agency and that you can find power production cheaper elsewhere. That's textbook small market thinking. That's exactly what you'd say if you were running the Brewers and couldn't afford to pay Pete what he's worth. But the Mets can afford it. Steve Cohen can afford it 10 times over. So why are we pretending like we need to find the bargain option? Edwin Díaz signs with the Dodgers for 3 years and $51 million. The Mets could have easily matched that, could have beaten it, should have beaten it. But Stearns decided that closers are overvalued and that the money could be better spent elsewhere. Again, that's small market logic. That's the kind of decision you make when you're working with limited resources and need to allocate every dollar perfectly. But when you have unlimited resources, you don't have to make those choices. You can have Edwin Díaz and still spend money everywhere else. Jorge Polanco gets signed to a bloated contract as some kind of bargain replacement for Pete Alonso's production. Polanco hit 8 home runs last year, 8. And Stearns thought that was a smart use of resources because the total contract value was lower than what Pete would have cost. That's trying to find value in the clearance bin when you have a blank check. That's shopping at the dollar store when you can afford Whole Foods. That's small market thinking applied to a big market reality, and it makes no sense whatsoever. And it's not just about individual moves. It's about the entire philosophy. Stearns keeps talking about sustainability and not mortgaging the future and building something that lasts. Those are all noble goals. But you know what? When you have Steve Cohen's money, you don't have to choose between winning now and building for the future. You can do both. You can sign star players in free agency and still invest in your farm system. You can be aggressive and sustainable at the same time. The only limit is your willingness to spend. And Steve Cohen has made it crystal clear that there is no limit. But David Stearns keeps acting like there is a limit. He keeps making decisions as if the Mets have a payroll ceiling they need to stay under. He keeps being conservative and cautious and careful when he should be aggressive and dominant and overwhelming. And the result is that the Mets, despite having more money than any other team in baseball, are operating like a mid-market franchise that's trying to compete on a budget. Look at the Dodgers. They have wealthy ownership. They have resources. And what do? They spend aggressively. They sign every top free agent they can. They trade for stars. They're not worried about sustainability or long-term payroll implications. They know that with their resources, they can always fix mistakes. They can always pivot. They can always reload. That's how you're supposed to operate when you have unlimited money. The Yankees do the same thing. They spend. They're aggressive. They go after the best players available. They're not sitting around trying to find market inefficiencies and undervalued players. They just get the guys they want and worry about everything else later. That's big market baseball. That's how you maximize your competitive advantage. But the Mets, under David Stearns, are doing the opposite. They're trying to be the smartest team in the room. They're trying to outsmart everyone with clever moves and analytical decisions. They're trying to prove that you don't need to spend money to win. And you know what? Maybe that's true if you're the Rays or the Guardians. Maybe you can win that way if you're forced to because of financial limitations. But why would you choose to operate that way when you don't have to? It's like Steve Cohen bought a Ferrari and hired a driver who only knows how to operate a Honda Civic. The Ferrari has all this power and speed and capability, but the driver keeps driving it like it's a budget car because that's all he knows. That's what's happening with the Mets right now. They have Ferrari resources with a Honda Civic operator. And here's what frustrates me most about this situation. Steve Cohen knows this is happening. He's not stupid. He can see that his president of baseball operations isn't using the resources available to him. He can see that the team is getting worse while competitors are getting better. He can see that the fan base is furious. And yet, so far, he's letting it continue. He's trusting that Stearns has a plan, that this is all going to work out somehow. But what if it doesn't? What if Stearns' small market approach doesn't translate to big market success? What if being conservative and analytical and careful just results in mediocrity because you're not taking advantage of your biggest competitive advantage? At what point does Cohen step in and say, this isn't working, we need someone who actually knows how to maximize the resources we have? Because that's the real question. It's not whether David Stearns is smart. He is. It's not whether he knows baseball. He does. The question is whether he's capable of adapting his approach to fit a completely different reality, whether he can overcome his small market conditioning and learn to think like a big market executive. And based on everything we've seen this offseason, the answer appears to be no. Stearns is who he is. He's a small market guy with small market instincts operating in a big market environment, and no amount of money from Steve Cohen is going to change that unless Stearns fundamentally changes how he thinks about roster construction and resource allocation. The problem isn't the resources. The problem is the unwillingness to use them. So here's what I want to know from you. How much longer do we give Stearns to figure this out? How many more off seasons do we watch him refuse to spend Steve Cohen's money before we admit this isn't working? How many more players do we lose because Stearns is too conservative to pay market value? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments because I'm genuinely curious how other Mets fans are processing this. And if you're as frustrated as I am watching this organization waste its biggest competitive advantage, hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep covering this story, keep holding the front office accountable, and keep demanding better from an organization that should be dominating baseball, but instead is treading water because of self-imposed limitations that make no sense. I'll see you in the next video where we continue breaking down the dysfunction at the top of this franchise.